Okay. People joining this live stream, we are talking about how historical data is handled in our knowledge base and its interaction with Wolfram Language. So, first up here, we seem to have the history of the area of the Roman Empire. I assume those are so what, I mean, do we consider this satisfactory? What's happening here, or what's going on here? This is a little weird. Can you describe this? So this is year minus 27, right? So it's not a data object, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So it should be a data object. I mean, that input syntax is pretty horrifying, right? I mean, this is definitely not the way it should look, right? Who do we have here? I assume we have the relevant people here.
Okay. Yeah. So the idea here would be to have a proper way to show the data in this case. What we have tried here is to put just pairs, that is the year, and then a filled curve with the polygon of the empire in that certain year, actually. So we would like to see what else or how are we going to put these things to work with the language. So a suggestion would be that this would benefit from a time series if it behaved as a time series instead of just being a list.
Well, yes. I mean, an analog of this is word frequency data, right? I mean, here, in this case, we're specifically requesting a time series, right? And we'll get a time series back, hopefully. This thing is awake. But so, in this case, this is a dated. What is going on here? Hey, is Alan with us here?
Really slow. Yeah, I'm here. We also have Francisco here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What happened there?
I will take a look on the servers. Yep.
I mean, I'm running the preliminary version here, so who knows what's happening, but something looks wrong there. That's bad. I don't even know how the monitoring works. I'm sure that it's part of the monitoring system. Yeah, something is very bad here. This is simply not working.
I'm taking a look right now.
No, it's not to do with some specific local, or maybe we need to get Roger here. Something is wrong here. Look. Cloud authentication is not working.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody needs to get, okay, do I need to do this?
Can Ben
no, okay, yeah, no, yeah. Okay, well, that's really bad, but okay. Anyway, what this should be is to say, you know, Roman Empire, which I'm not going to be able to do because it's timing out. And then, oh, for goodness sake, this should then be, you know, dated polygon, and arguably, the right way to do this would be to have that second argument be time series, or alternatively, you know, all could be synonymous with that, and that would generate a time series. Does that make sense to people?
Yes, that makes sense.
However, notice that that time series has to have interpolation order 0. Am I making sense?
Wait, why time series as a value for dated?
No, look. That's analogous to this case here. Okay?
Well, why not all? I mean, that's the typical thing for dated. Right. I mean, the standard thing to get a time series of all the values with dated of anything would be all.
Yeah, I understand. Does it give a time series typically?
Yes.
Okay, well, why is this not giving a time series? This is giving a list, which is wrong.
But isn't this the fundamental point, Rodrigo and everybody else, that time series doesn't, we can't support a time series of polygons.
Yep. The main issue here is that, as Alan says, we need to have this structure, this property, and these results to work as a time series.
Okay, but
instead
so
of
what's
just
the
having a
problem
list.
with that? What's the problem? Is the problem that time series does not let you give lists of polygons? Is that the problem, or is there a different problem?
The problem is that we need to convert that in so it works.
I don't understand. It's trivial to convert this to a time series unless time series doesn't work with lists of polygons. And are you asking me to test that, or what's the story here?
No, there are some.
Oh yeah, is that wait?
Features-
If this is an issue about time series, are the folks who are working on time series here? Is it an issue about time series, or is it an issue about something else? Is this a problem with time series?
I thought it was. Don't we have Gosha and other people here who would be able to speak to this?
Okay, so fine. So is this a problem with time series? Can we please answer that? By the way, where are the notes from the previous meeting? Okay,
Fatima
Gosha,
says sorry, we had Fatima last time. We have Ben this time. He wasn't able to join last time. Ben, I think you were CC'd on the notes from her. We can pass those back to Stephen so we can look at those.
I mean, we can set up a meeting and discuss the issues that you have if you have an with time series. But basically, you can set up interpolation order 0, so it does not linearly interpolate between the polygons. And if you have, the field curve as a head, right, it's going to understand that the values are symbolic.
Right. So, what is the problem, guys? By the way, Roger,
Yeah.
if Roger is here,
I'm
why
here.
is Cloud Connect not working for me?
Oh,
now it is working. Now it is working. Okay, so that's an issue between you and Warren and those guys. Please figure out what was going on.
okay.
You can see what was happening here. This was not working. For
Right. Yeah.
And why did that not work? Well, that may be a completely different thing. What? What is that doing?
Francisco is going to have to look at the server.
Yes, it seems the
what's happening
database of one of the production servers is hanging right now and restarting the service. I don't know why it's not redirecting to the other production server.
Okay, so someone on a call on a live stream says he's had minor problems connecting to our infrastructure since January 1st. Well, gosh, how could that be? This is all well monitored, and this shouldn't happen. Okay, in any case, okay, so before we waste more time here, okay, first of all, why are you using this wacky syntax here? Why are you not using this syntax here? Can somebody actually answer these questions? Why are you not using that syntax? Is there some problem with that syntax?
I
Hello?
doubt there's a problem with that syntax. I'm not sure why they're being slow to answer, but I think they're just using the fullest form of these expressions. I don't think there's a reason not to do that.
Okay. And why is it so slow, Nick? There's no caching for this? Is Nick with us?
So generally the dated versions don't have specific caching set up because as we change the date parameters, we don't necessarily know if they're cacheable beyond,
Okay, so the all version should be cached.
Yes. And then they're There are some tentative designs to have an optimized version where if you call multiple times, we basically behind the scenes call for the all version and then have to, if you look up a specific time, we can extract from there, but it requires a fair bit of retooling under the hood. So it isn't beyond its prototype stages.
Okay. The granularity is wrong here. These should have been data objects with the correct granularity, right? With a year granularity. Am I making sense?
Yes, we'll fix that.
Okay. Other than that, this time series seems to work fine. What's the problem? What's the problem, please, guys?
Okay, so do we want to use this as time series and entity value or just a list?
No, I said it should return the time series, just like word frequency data returns the time series. And that's like what other entities do when they're given dated, right? Right, Alan?
Yes.
So I don't understand what the problem is here. This seems like a no-brainer issue. This seems very straightforward. Now, the question of taking that time series and saying, I don't know what happens if we say, how would I apply geo area to all of this?
Time series map.
It's not exactly fast, is it? But okay, so let's say, now if I say date list plot here, that's going to do that, which is wrong because it's going to have, I mean, since our data is really stepwise. Now, does that mean that since we have control over the time series, we should generate it with interpolation order 0? Does that make sense to people?
Yes, but the plots override that often. So you need to use dates list step plot.
No, okay. What do you mean they override it? That's wrong. That shouldn't be the case. Look, if the time series has interpolation in it, then when you plot that time series, it should use the interpolation that's in the time series. Okay. That's how it should work. I mean, if it's doing something different, I don't think it's right. So, okay, let's plan to, you can tell me if there's some reason why that can't be implemented, but that seems like the right way to do it.
I agree.
Okay, fine. So that's probably an issue for Brett.
Yes.
Okay, who isn't here. So,
but we can discuss that with the
Okay, so granularity has to be fixed, time seriesing has to be fixed, interpolation order has to be put in. Otherwise, this looks great. What's next to look at? What's next, guys?
The next area would be to work with interval arithmetic, which is something Nick has already been doing. And then we need to seek a way how to add historical polygons to GeoLookups.
Okay.
Which we already treated on the previous meeting.
Okay, so would you please tell me what we actually need to talk about? I mean, this looks like it's under control as well. This is, I don't understand what we're doing here. Shouldn't this be using data interval?
Yeah, that's I mean, we're planning on having a convenience of if you have intervals of data objects, we will be able to convert them to date intervals.
Excellent. Okay, so there's nothing to discuss here, so let's move on. Okay, historical polygons to GeoLookups.
We already reviewed this on the previous meeting, and we checked some things out. So the problem here would be how to add this to the geo entities to the GeoLookup queries that we have in Mathematica. So what we have here is, please go down. How are we going to work with functions like geo within Q, geo entities, or geo-identify? So those are, we have some.
I understand. So this is, so you're saying, do you have a proposal for this? Oh, yeah, you do. Okay. Yeah, I think so. I mean, geo within Q is, I mean, the thing would be, presumably, so here's an interesting question. If you say geo position of, I don't know what, London or something, okay? We'll get the geo position. And now if I say dated of that geo position, 1252 or something, Right now, that doesn't mean anything, but I think so there's a question of whether that dated should go inside the geoposition or whether it should sit outside. My feeling is it should work in both cases. So geoposition can take a time as well. Am I making sense? Do you know that?
The
Yes.
fourth element of the list, right?
Yes, that's right. But this should be equivalent to, presumably, that, this should be another form of that. And so if I say, so an interesting question is, this is a reasonable question. If I say, is this is, go ahead.
We could change that. I was wondering whether we would lose readability, because here the year is very clear, but the notation in geoposition is based on...
I know, I just said I don't think we should change it. I think this should be equivalent to the geoposition with 4 arguments, but I don't think it should canonicalize to the geoposition with 4 arguments. Unless we choose to format the geoposition with 4 arguments with a date object, which I think is also a possibility. What do you think about that idea?
Well, my favorite would be to immediately change to geoposition, because we have so many functions expecting geopositions. Now generalizing
then what is your response to my idea of having, if there's a geoposition with a time, to formatting that with a date, with a formatted date? Do you get what I'm saying? So if I say, look, if I say geoposition, if I say geoposition of like the International Space Station, it should give me a geoposition with a time. Is that correct? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So my proposal is, don't do this. Okay. Instead, that's an absolute time thing. But instead, at least for formatting, that's a little ugly, isn't it? For formatting, give that as a date object.
So we just typeset the last element in the list as a date object?
That's what I'm suggesting. I'm not super thrilled about that, because you're telling me that in terms of the actual meaning of the geoposition, the fact is we really should teach things that eat geopositions to take granular dates and things there, because we're going to have trouble if that date is not granular, if that's an instant date. Am I making sense?
Yes. So the motivation here is that when we have an array of these, we want the possibility of providing numbers that can be packed.
Well, that's fine, but this is a different case. Look, so I think that the question of whether you canonicalize to the 4-argument form, to me, it seems like if you don't canonicalize, you still have a readable thing. And I would argue it's worth looking at supporting dated of whatever in the places that eat geoposition, but maybe that's too hard. I don't know. Okay, so those are the 2 cases, but this is clearly not an acceptable case.
Right. So perhaps what we can do is, whenever we have 4 arguments, we could show a summary box, and then we can write there whatever we want.
Yeah, that's a reasonable possibility. Although, let me repeat again, that date needs to be able to be granular, I believe. So we'd have to store the granularity somewhere.
Well, but then geoposition would not be an event anymore. It would be something extended.
Yeah, okay, but that's what we're gonna. Well, okay. Listen, I'm not certain about geoposition, naked geoposition, or point-wise geoposition. Okay, look, there are 2 issues with respect to this historical stuff. What we have here is a point in space at a point in time. That's what it basically is, right?
Right.
And then there are other things which are an extended object in space. I think the set of things, okay, so your argument would be the set of things which are at a point in space but extended in time by granularity, like year granularity or something, isn't really meaningful. That will be your argument.
Right. In the same way that when we want something extended in space, we use polygon or something like that, and not a geoposition with...
Fair enough. Okay, fine. Okay, but still, okay, so let's start looking at this geo within Q stuff and so on.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Wait. Seth is asking on our live stream about entity value and whether the results will be different. No, they should be the same. They should both give a time series, I believe. Up above that. But let's go back to Geo within Q. Okay.
Okay. So the idea here would be that how we're going to treat Geo within Q for entities that both have a date range. So the idea here would be which times are we going to use the entity in that date. Well, let me rephrase that.
Okay, let me see if I understand. Okay, so Geo within Q asks, is, just to remind ourselves what it is, it's if the location is contained within the region, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so for example, Carl on a live stream asks whether it's possible, how would we find all countries which have been within the Roman Empire at some time? See what I'm asking?
Yeah, that's one of the questions that we're going to try to cover with these possible interpretations for some of these queries.
Okay.
So, well, our first idea would be, okay, so should we treat this retrieve the entities with a dated with a year? So the first query would be, okay, we just retrieve the polygons for each time for each dated, and then we just evaluate from that. So what about if we don't use dated? So what does Geo within Q for that example for the query 2, the Roman Republic at Mount Vesuvius? Was it always at?
Yeah, I understand the question. Right. So this gets into our temporal logic business.
Yes.
And I assume we don't have Jan here to talk about temporal logic. I mean, remind me how this would work with those temporal logic primitives that we maybe Nick can speak to that.
Yeah, or Jose could jump in. I mean, I think the reasoning within temporal logic is that we're not, with queries like this, we don't necessarily always have a Boolean answer. Is Mount Vesuvius contained within the Roman Republic? Was false at some point because the Roman Republic didn't exist. It was true at a certain point, and at another, defined point, it was no longer true.
Right.
And exactly how we would represent that within something like Geo within Q seems a little tricky. I mean, we have the same sort of overlapping interval questions with, date arithmetic of is today or is now before today. We say, well, no, that's an ambiguous question because it's contained within the interval. And we have a variation of Geo within Q for dates. We have date within Q and date overlaps Q to sort of disambiguate between the cases of partial overlapping, which I think Geo within Q handles with an option, right, Jose?
Yes. I was thinking that perhaps here we could also use something like a piecewise, and then we just specify the.
What is this option? What is the string option fully contained? That's totally weird.
Yes. So here the question is whether when we compare a region to another region, whether we request that one is fully contained on the other one, or they can be overlapping. So effectively, when we compare two regions, there are like 7 different things, like fully disjoint, touching, overlapping, contained, touching on the outside, touching on the inside.
All right. So listen, this is the spatial logic analog of the temporal logic we were discussing.
Exactly.
So basically, the point is Geo within Q is naive. And unfortunately, what we are highlighting here is that we actually need spatio-temporal logic. Right? We actually, neither spatial logic nor temporal logic is going to be enough. We actually need some full spatio-temporal form.
Correct. Yeah, so this is a especially complicated case, yes.
Well, it's good that we're coming up with this case right now because we still need to, we need to loop back to the temporal logic stuff. Oh boy. Okay, so what's happening with the geospatial statistics people and doing spatial kind of spatial logic. Is that going to happen as part of the geospatial statistics stuff? Gosha, can you comment on that?
Oh, well, yeah, we have, like in the spatial statistics project, we have both set up. So the Cartesian coordinates and also support for the geo case.
No, I understand that, but are you dealing with this calculus of withinness, so to speak?
To some extent, yes, we have to, because when we compare, observation regions and whether the points are, the events happen in the observation region, or we want to take subset, yes.
Okay.
So we need this, and we need this functionality to answer many questions, yes.
Okay, so right now, so Geo within Q has this hack for fully contained, which hopefully will be more properly handled by the spatial logic stuff. Now the question is, what about the temporal dimension of within Q? What a mess.
Well, for example, the question that was asked before, which countries have been contained at some point in the Roman Empire, that could be handled with geo entities. If we say geo entities and we put the Roman Empire,
yes,
countries, we could return the list directly there.
Well, I understand, but so that, okay, so let me try out that case. So geo entities you've talked about here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is what mountains were in the Roman Empire. So this works right now. Oh, here we go. Look at this.
So here it worked because we requested with the full polygon with the explicit polygon, as you can see, the dated of polygon.
No, but what about this one here? That one doesn't work right now.
No.
Okay, so that's saying the geo entities. This is pretty nice, actually. This is pretty nice. If this worked, this would be really cool. So this is asking which countries as of 1500 were contained in, what is geo entities? Does geo entities have the same containment concept here? Contained in that region. Does it have to be fully contained or not? Okay, so this has the fully contained question, and probably we should promote that option to some kind of proper option, not some kind of weird string thing. Am I making sense? And it probably should be in geo entities as well as in geo within Q.
Yes, it was never documented because
well, it appears to have been documented in geo within Q, which seems to be a mistake to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need something which let's see. So what you're saying is, so what would that be called? That would be called, I mean, that's some kind of thing that's like fully spatially contained or something. Well, maybe we just can call it fully contained. I mean, is that I mean, there's things like contains. There's a bunch of things that are used for things like strings and so on. And I think this fully contained business could apply to those as well.
Yeah, and there are some extra options proposed in the previous section about simultaneously contained, or because you could apply also a temporal logic to this containment.
Right. Well, so are you suggesting then that instead of a fully contained true false, you're suggesting some kind of
containment type or
containment relation, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Containment relation is
Yeah, the problem is that, as Jose said, there are many possible spatial relations, like not only containment, but also touching or overlapping, that maybe it's better to express in a more flexible way.
Right. Well, I think we need to know how some of the other design is going to work. Okay, so if we can get a separate discussion going about whatever you guys in the statistics area and spatial statistics have come up with, that would be good. And we need to combine that with what we're thinking about with temporal logic and see if we can come up with something for this. But for right now, yeah, Gosha, can you say something about that design?
I don't know yet. I'll just have to look into cases.
Okay.
The issue is also for computational purposes. Sometimes don't have we use some kind of digital, I don't know how to say it, numerized regions, not
Sure.
so yeah.
Right. So there's an epsilon associated with
Right.
the less than sign, the equal sign.
Exactly. And also how we define the mesh or the border of the polygon is, and the straight lines are not straight and such. So yes.
Yeah, I know. So it's complicated, right? But I mean, I think. Okay. Question: in what we're doing here, are we going to run into the same temporal logic issues as we're running into with spatial logic here? In terms of what is the simultaneous arrow true? What is that about?
That relates to the properties that we have, we suggest on the previous section. Those are some ideas to try to narrow, try to find some ideas that we try to flesh out on how to treat the containment.
Okay. Well, so what you're saying is, I see. Okay. Hold on. Okay, so let's actually read what you had here. Okay, so you're saying, is Vesuvius within the Roman Empire? Yeah, well, that's the sort of simple-minded interpretation. The convex hull of the Roman, not quite the convex hull, but the temporal outer hull of the Roman Empire, if I'm making sense, right?
Correct.
Any point that was ever in the Roman Empire counts as being in the Roman Empire. Okay, so has entity 2 been what does this mean? Has entity 2 at some point?
So the idea is that the Roman Empire has evolved over the years. So can we take one of any polygons, or should we take all the possible polygons of the Roman Empire to do this comparison?
Taking one polygon seems very silly. That doesn't seem relevant. I mean, the fact that the thing split in two is not, and it happened to be disjointed, I don't think that's relevant. If that's what this is about. Is that what this is about?
I think so.
Okay, I don't think that's relevant. I think it is what it is, which includes multiple polygons if necessary.
No. Here they are splitting by year. So in each year, the polygon had a different shape.
Yes. So what's your question here? So are you asking? I see. What is this interpretation to? Has it always been within this thing, or what?
No, if at any time it has been within the Roman Republic or the Roman Empire, the Roman Kingdom in this case.
Oh, so it wasn't within the Roman Kingdom, but it was within the Roman Republic. Is that true?
Yep. So the question will be if we want to interpret the historical polygon, the historical country, to cover all the possible polygons that it had, or only one, let's say the more extended, which might not cover all the polygons in his history, because it might have different borders, even if it's more extended. So that was the question here. If we want to interpret that as if at any time at any point in the time, in the whole history of this country, the point asked, like the Vesuvius, was inside this country. So like if I asked for dated all for in the left-hand side.
I think the simplest thing to do here is to treat if you don't specify a time, you just take all the polygons at all times and compute the union and consider that that's the Roman Empire.
Isn't that the default polygon for a historical country, though? Is the maximum extent the union of all the
Yes,
polygons?
isn't no, but it doesn't cover all the possible polygons. So it's the
Oh.
polygon with the maximum area.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Which is-
I see. So it's the
not
core
a,
polygon.
not a union, it's a specific selected largest polygon.
Right.
Okay.
Because the polygon with the union of all the polygons, which could be, of course, computed specifically for such a lookup, it's like a very artificial polygon sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. So look, there are clearly many cases here, and we have to parameterize all of them. We can't just pick. I mean, there will be some default interpretation, but we're not just going to pick one of these and say the others are tough luck.
Question, but when you look at the historical kingdoms like that, sometimes you see the map of like the largest reach, and that would be the union of all the polygons, wouldn't it?
No, because at the largest reach, there may be regions that were conquered later.
Right.
That, yeah, and were not included at that point.
You know, I happened to run into a historian a few days ago who it turns out has written a book about country borders that I just got a copy of that just came out. And the question is, what is a country border? It seemed like the most plausible definition was it's, you know, on different sides, you pay taxes to different people or you get conscripted into the armies of different people. And that seemed to be the most robust, from what I could understand, the most robust definition of country borders. But it is country borders are a strange thing. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Or just who issues your passport?
In modern times, yeah, but passports haven't existed. Passports have only existed for like 150 years, maybe.
Oh, it's true. So
The
I guess the taxes are really important.
right, taxes have existed for a lot longer. Taxes have existed for
forever
since the beginning of civilization. Maybe they're a defining feature of that. I don't know. Okay.
So do you think that once we parameterize all these cases, maybe we should then pick which one will be the default?
In my opinion, if you just specify a date, then you know which polygon it is. If you don't specify a date and you want to do this type of computation, you just compute with the union of all polygons, because any other choice seems random to me.
Sorry, say that again.
Yes, I think when we use dated, we can either specify a given date or say all. So when we have a specific date, then we know which polygon it is.
Yes.
When we say all, I think we should just compute the union of all the polygons we have and compute with that polygon. Because any other thing, if we choose the largest extent or the latest or something like that, it's going to look random.
Yeah, but anyway, for example, when you request the polygon with entity value, right now we are returning the largest because that was until now I think the most sensible choice. Because
yes, with that I agree. But when you say all, somehow you are asking for all at the same time, right?
For all, yes, but when you don't say anything, then we are like defaulting to all. That's I think that was my question. What will be the default when you don't say anything?
That I don't. Yeah, the largest case seems fine in that case, but not when you say all.
Yeah, I agree that all should cover all the cases, and that's
right.
Do we need other named geovariants to specify for these?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Because it's exclusive of dated, right? We're talking about other ways of selecting other forms of a thing that are not necessarily tied to a specific date.
Maybe because, for example, if you want the union polygon of all the time, that could be considered a different variant, of course. or a very specific polygon, let's say, flavor. Don't know.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
an interesting idea.
Well, okay, let's just survey what we have to figure out here. So I like the idea of using geovariant for something to do with this. Oh boy, there's a lot of stuff here. So, okay, there are cases that we can definitely do. And what on earth is this simultaneous thing doing?
That's a proposed option to say for if we are going to compare entities at the same time. In this query, we have geoentities for military conflicts that happen in the Roman Republic space. We would simultaneously say, okay, so military conflict that happened at the time of the Roman Republic during that same time span.
Sorry, say that again.
So with simultaneous, we are narrowing down temporally the military conflicts to the time span of the Roman Republic.
You don't know when the Roman Republic existed, but you want to find out what military conflicts occurred in that.
Simultaneous is a totally weird word. I mean, that's basically the natural dated period. Geoentities here, this is asking for the Roman Republic this is asking over the full course of the Roman Republic. Okay, the point is the Roman Republic is a thing in space and time. And geoentities could represent the spatio-temporal thing here. And this would then ask, since military conflicts have both a space and a place and time, this is asking what is the intersection of military conflicts with the spatio-temporal region that is the Roman Republic. Am I making sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Right. So I don't think you ever need this. What would you want to do? If you want the Roman Republic in a particular year, then you say it. Otherwise, this is the full spatio-temporal Roman Republic.
What do you mean? How do you find modern day military conflicts that occurred, military conflicts from some other period that occurred?
Okay, so I mean, that word would not be simultaneous, it would be contemporaneous. If it was anything, but I don't think that will really work. And I don't even know how to spell contemporaneous. Contemporaneous, I think. That doesn't look right. But anyway. Okay. You're saying, how do I find a modern military conflict? Yes, that's interesting. Well, I think that then what you have to do, depending on how the defaults are set up, you would say dated. Well, what is modern? I mean, military conflict happened at some time. So unless there's something burning today, right? If I say, let's say 20th century or something, that's the only thing I would basically be saying there. And by the way, that granular case should work. Get what I'm saying? Dated with a granular date object should work. I don't know if it does right now. Can somebody check whether that works?
I didn't see what you were trying to do.
I said 20th century. So I'm saying there's a dated with a granular date object. So the question of whether a thing with so for example, if I say word frequency data, okay, of word, comma, and then I say 20th century.
Oh, this is resolving something like a century to an appropriate date object in the language, which is
no, that's not the issue. The issue is whether this returns a time series or whether this returns something different. Because a specific year, this will just return a number. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So with this particular case, when it's a granular thing that is above, why doesn't that work? Oh, no, why doesn't that work?
Does it need?
Oh, I know what it's.
Specify?
Yeah, I know what it's doing. That's not right. That's not what it. Yeah, it has a date spec after the time series. So that case has already armored itself against this issue. But do you understand what I'm saying? That if you say, I mean, maybe I can do this right now for something like this. If I say something like, okay, if I say UK, and then I say dated population, comma, that thing there. Okay. Well, that was fine, except for the non-granularity of the years. That worked just fine. That did exactly what it should have done. However, if I were to put in there date object of 1901, okay, that gives a specific number. That's a little weird. Do you get what I'm saying? That a date object which is granular gives a time series, but a date object which is singular, at least on the distance scale of this particular data set, gives a single number. Did you get what I'm saying?
What would you expect the
Yeah,
lattice?
well, I think in the case of population, our sampling rate may not be much more than annual, but
No,
if you were
it's
to say-
annual. It's annual, right?
Yeah.
It's annual. But what I'm saying is, so this is a case where I'm getting a number that is, because we're down at the sampling level, then I'm getting a single number. But if I go to something which is still a date object, but with a coarser granularity, I'm getting a time series.
Well, what we had before was an interval. So the granular date is not the same thing as the interval.
Fair enough, but I'm saying with a granular date, what should you get?
So perhaps with a granular date, we should always get a number, some sort of average of that period. And then if we want the actual time series, we specify a time series, which is an interval between two possibly
That's
granular
not unreasonable.
dates.
It's not unreasonable. Let's think about whether that would actually work. I mean, that would at least be consistent, I think. Okay, but so
and we also have the method of, with date interval, you'll be able to say date interval of a granular date and turn it into the specific period in time. So in principle, we're trying to make the transformation between a granular date, which is, a low resolution instant.
I see what you're saying. So a low resolution. So what Jose is saying is that the low resolution thing would basically imply an averaging over that region.
Right.
Whereas the date interval of that granular region would turn into a date interval, which would imply a span over that region, which would then be filled in with a time series. Seems to make sense to me.
Yeah.
Could you go back to the military, the GeoEntities military conflict case? I'm trying to wrap my head. What if I wanted all military conflicts of any time that fall within the borders of the Roman Republic? Is it just military conflict, or is it dated all of military?
I think it's
conflict?
dated all.
Okay.
I would.
And
think
are we saying that the default GeoEntities Roman Republic military conflict would default to assuming military conflicts within the date span for which the Roman Republic?
That's what I'm assuming, but I have to admit that I don't completely understand all the semantics of that.
Okay.
So I think this is Francisco's question. By default, the entity should be some specific moment, perhaps the largest extent. And if you want all the moments, you should specify dated all. Because when we have an entity, I find a bit strange that an entity represents a full period of time.
Well, that's a spatio-temporal entity. The question is a historical country a spatio-temporal entity? Because, I mean, clearly we have temporal entities. The Elizabethan period, for example, is a temporal entity. Actually, also probably implies some spatial information as well. But that's a temporal entity, whereas Italy is a spatial entity. And historical country could be a spatio-temporal entity. That makes sense? Or we can decide, I think it really has to be a spatio-temporal entity.
But then by default, most of the properties would return time series.
That's what I think, yes. Unless you specifically say dated, unless you project the historical country by slicing it at a particular time with a dated. I think that's going to be the most sensible way to do this. In other words,
could potentially require very large amounts of data.
Well, that we have to think through. But I mean, like, for example, oh my gosh. I mean, it's great that we can do this. GeoEntities 600 BC. Why do we have to say polygon there?
I think that's just the current version, right?
What's that?
Yes. So the idea is to improve this to not need the polygon there.
Okay.
So that's
okay,
part
fine.
of all this work. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this also, what if that was building?
Where?
Not mountain. In that, instead of mountains within the Roman kingdom,
yes,
building
yes, right.
We need to choose things that are also themselves. Well, I guess mountains are.
Well, if we had a
temporal to a degree, but we're talking about different timescales.
Yes. Right. So you're saying a building is another spatio-temporal entity. A military conflict is another spatio-temporal entity. Although an individual battle is presumably mostly a point in time, and for the data we have, a point in space.
Right.
Well, this is already. Oh boy. Yeah, okay. So a dated object, the position of a dated wrapper around a building before the building existed should surely give missing. This is complicated. Oh boy. Okay. But by the way, you guys are working on leader data. I hope this is nearly on the language integration of leader data, right?
Yes, that's some question we have for the integration of leader data.
And what is the question here, really?
So the idea we have here is that we already have leader data entities as tenures, as a mixture of a point of a person at a certain moment in time, at a certain jurisdiction, and with a certain government position. So we have intersect of 4 things here. So do we want to have the entities as that, as a tuple of those 4 things? Do we want to have them as tenures to have to make lookups? Do we want to have them as, for instance, a leader data entity called Barack Obama, President of US, or, well, Donald Trump, President of US? Do we want an entity called President of the US? And then we have dated, and those dated will show entity instances.
I think we're going to need multiple kinds of entities. I think the tenures, as you're calling them, of, the particular time that so-and-so was, Steve Jobs was CEO of Apple twice, right? So
yes,
those are 2 different tenures in your sense, and probably should be different entities. But yet the position, so I claim there are 3 things. There's a person, Steve Jobs. There's a position, CEO of Apple. And there's a tenure, Steve Jobs as CEO of Apple, from 1978 to 1984 or whatever it was, 5, whatever.
Okay, correct. So you're including
is CEO of Apple a single entity, or is there a position in an organization? Because we also have organizations.
No, I think it's a position in an organization. Now, I'm not sure what happens if there are co-CEOs.
We could just return a data list. Yeah, we can just go with a whole thing, and then we put out a data list, and then return 2 results for that case, or whatever the people we have.
And
like,
what if somebody is a co-CEO for a while and then they're an individual CEO?
we might have entity instances for that in that case, so we can put specific points of time because for each of them differently, maybe.
And what if they're an interim attorney general or something, and then they become? How does that work?
We do have also for every tenure or every leader data entity that we have, we already also have a property called position status. So we can cover for acting, interims, regents, and the likes. We can even have one for co-governments to say, okay, so we have a bunch of people here.
Okay. Oh boy. Okay, there's some complicated stuff here. We're not going to be able to resolve this today. I think the main thing is the realization that we need some kind of spatio-temporal logic stuff. And it seems to me what we should aim to do, we will have a partial understanding of how that will work in general, but we should try to understand what the default cases are going to be. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to meet again about this. Alan, do you think progress can be made without me, or do you think we should
I think progress can be made without you on a number of fronts here. I think we're already gonna meet again soon to look at the leader data related stuff because we need to do some surf migration, but we can come back with pieces. And this is a lot to fold into one thing. I think there are separate things we should peel off into different meetings and follow-ups.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very complicated kind of knowledge to deal with.
You're right. The overall spatio-temporal handling, though, is something that would crop up in a lot of them.
I'm thinking that's right. And I mean, one question is whether the region, whether the whole region framework can handle 4-dimensional regions. I think it can, can't it?
Yes, I think it can. I mean, if we can handle the spatial case, then time is just another dimension.
Right. And that's what I suspect we should be doing here, is we should be thinking about region intersections and things in time. And the question is whether we can have a reasonable representation. If we try to take the Roman Empire, for example, and we try to make its 4-dimensional regional specification with all the meshing and all that kind of stuff, can we actually do that? Because it will get meshed in the time direction as well.
Well, in that case, it will be 3D really, because we have 2D or geo stuff.
Yeah, right. Yes, good point. It's 2 + 1 dimensional space-time. Right.
So I'm not sure it's valid to interpolate on the, or to have, let's say...
It's not interpolation. It's going to be this 0th order interpolation in the time direction. It's going to be stepwise interpolation, right? That's what we believe is the change and hold type interpolation.
Right now, yes. Yes, I think that's the interpretation we are giving. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, listen, I have to run off here, but very interesting. Thanks to folks on the live stream, and to be continued.